Well, election fraud misinformation on the internet has plunged about 73% since President Trump was blocked by several social media platforms. That's according to research firm Signal Labs. After thousands of far-right users were banned from more well-known social media sites, we've seen the dialogue undergo a seismic shift to other platforms like Parler, Telegram, and Signal. Some of these sites host encrypted conversations that make it tougher for the nation's top security officials to track potential threats ahead of the inauguration. For more on this now, let us bring in CBSN technology reporter Dan Patterson. Thanks for joining us. Boy, that's quite a statistic when you talk about, since the president's been banned from Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and these other sites, there's been this major shift in the conversation. Now, it's not just the president was banned, but also all sorts of dialogue that talked about the election being stolen and that there was widespread fraud when there really wasn't. So, Dan, Parler's app is still blocked from being downloaded, but its website is back up. How do Parler, Signal, and Telegram differ from some of these more mainstream social media platforms that we know about, like Twitter or Facebook? And how are they able to spread their messages? Do they not have the same policies as some of these other websites?
Good to see you, Anne-Marie. So Parler functions, and in fact, the code base is very similar to mainstream social networks, at least when Parler was operational. It simply didn't have the scale, but it was very similar. Telegram, Signal, and some of the other messaging apps are more similar to like iMessage or GChat. They're intended for one-to-one or small group communication. So we know that the policies are kind of similar, at least here in the United States. Telegram is based in the UAE and Signal is based in Silicon Valley. And generally, these apps, which have millions of users, try to adhere to the local laws, so they write a lot of their policies around the local laws of the countries in which they operate.
So I would think, though, because they're generally set up for one-on-one communication, it makes it a lot tougher to organize an event like the one that we saw on January 6th. I mean, how do you speak to a large group of people with these with Parler or Signal?
Well, we have seen this kind of fiery debate about, air quotes, deplatforming. There are strong arguments on either side, and generally it's understood that deplatforming solves one problem, which is communication and recruitment at very large scale, because it takes advantage of these incredible, of the scale of these platforms. But it also introduces a whole suite of other problems. And some of those other problems are that although people who have been deplatformed from the large networks aren't able to reach the same volume of users, they're able to speak in a way that kind of hardens the communication or has a more direct line of communication with users. So it's smaller, but a more intense group.
So what are we learning about the online threats ahead of Inauguration Day? We saw some video that was posted overnight by The New Yorker, and there are people, within the Capitol that are kind of like talking about how they're following a directive from the president. Now, we haven't really heard from the president. You and I have talked about how often, the online chatter is based on what the president said, and every word is sort of parsed out to determine whether or not he's giving people a signal or giving people an order. Now that has been pretty much silent. We've heard a little bit from him, but it's been pretty much silenced. How does encryption on some of these platforms, complicate matters for law enforcement when they're trying to vet potential acts of violence, and they don't have access now to the wide platform that Twitter had given them?
Yeah, so let's separate out those two questions, Anne-Marie. First, we don't know a lot, at least in terms of knowing and facts about what will happen on the 20th. Now, what we do know is that D.C. has kind of transformed into a militarized city, and we know that posters encouraging violence have circulated across the web. But I have spent a ton of time inside chats on Telegram, Discord, Signal, and others, and there's a lot of, well, dis and misinformation circulating within those apps. And there seems to be a message that, hey, look, they're on to us. Don't go out and commit acts of violence. But we see those same types of posts in groups, especially in Telegram, where there are circulating posters that say, please protest peacefully or go to your state capitals. Look, Emery, we don't know a lot about what's planned on the 20th. We see all kinds of noise, but not a lot of signal. Now, to go back to your second question, look, these apps and the use of encryption is pretty hotly contested. People who work in information security, cybersecurity, information technology have long advocated for the use of encryption because it not just protects our private communication, it protects our private thoughts. We need encryption. But at the same time, encryption can hide some of the darkest and creepiest parts of the web. So it goes back to this reduction of scale, but maybe an increase in the hardening of communication, or it potentially could lend to some more extreme types of communication. It's just a real challenging time to get a sense of where that signal is within the very large volume of noise that exists on the social web right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I know we're going to continue the conversation with you, Dan. For now, we got to go, though, so thank you so much.
Great to see you.
So QAnon has played a big role in some of the chatter that we see online. To learn more about the pervasiveness of the baseless QAnon conspiracy theory and how it found itself in the middle of American politics, be sure to check out our CBSN Originals documentary on the QAnon effect. You can stream it anytime on the CBS News app.